He helped an alien woman retrieve her bag. Unaware she controlled his fate, the port was enormous, stretching far beyond the eye could see. A vast tangle of docking bays, towering cargo cranes, and ships of every shape and color imaginable. Each vessel, sleek or rugged, carried a unique signature of its people, and the air hummed with the constant chatter of aliens from hundreds of worlds. Humans were rare in this sector, often seen as minor workers or temporary visitors. Most aliens ignored them, some with indifference, others with mild disdain, but Ethan Hale moved among them with quiet patience, as he always had. He had been working at the interstellar cargo port for several years, handling containers and parcels with careful precision. It was not a glamorous job, but it kept him fed, gave him a place to live, and allowed him to observe the galaxy without stepping directly into its politics or wars. On this particular day, the port was busier than usual. Several massive freighters were unloading simultaneously, each commanded by different species, all with their own customs and rules. The chatter was deafening, a chaotic mixture of clicks, growls, hisses, and tones that Ethan did not fully understand, but had grown accustomed to over time. He navigated the crowd of aliens and humans alike with practiced ease, moving cargo and checking manifests, his mind methodically following routines. It was a normal day, as normal as any day could be in a place as chaotic as this. Then, amid the roar of engines and the clatter of containers, a sudden disturbance drew attention. A sleek, silver vessel descended from one of the upper docking bays, its engine hum louder than most ships in the area. A small delegation of aliens disembarked, moving with swift precision, their movements coordinated and deliberate. They were clearly someone of importance, though their identities remained unclear. Aliens nearby paused, bowing slightly or stepping back to give them room. Humans, including Ethan, instinctively did the same, though he stayed at a respectful distance, watching quietly as the delegation made its way toward the central hub of the port. Then it happened. In the rush and confusion, a small, cylindrical travel bag slipped from the grasp of one of the delegation members. It tumbled across the floor, clattering against metal beams and containers, drawing attention from those nearby. Several security drones buzzed toward it immediately, scanning its surface with precise lasers. In most cases, a dropped bag could be dangerous. It could be a weapon, a forbidden object, or something extremely sensitive. The drones approached with calculated caution, their sensors flickering as they prepared to examine and possibly neutralize the item. Panic rippled through the surrounding aliens. Some shouted warnings in languages Ethan did not understand, while others simply froze, unsure of what to do. Ethan, however, did not panic. His eyes had noticed the small alien woman standing a few meters away, her movements tense, her eyes wide with worry. Unlike the others, she did not reach for weapons or call security. She only wanted her bag back. Ethan did not know her name, her rank, or her importance. He only saw fear and urgency in her expression. Without a second thought, he stepped forward, moving calmly but quickly past the hovering drones. The crowd of bystanders parted instinctively, giving him a path that no one else dared take. He reached the bag just as the nearest drone extended its scanning arm toward it. With a careful motion, he scooped up the bag and held it tightly against his chest, keeping it clear of the drone's sensors. The hum of their energy fields buzzed around him, but they did not immediately interfere. Ethan could feel the weight of every eye on him, hundreds of alien gazes, some curious, some judgmental, all waiting to see what he would do. He turned toward the alien woman, who was frozen in place, as if unsure whether she could trust anyone to retrieve something so important. She nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if acknowledging his bravery. Ethan walked carefully toward her, mindful not to drop the bag or attract the drone's attention. When he reached her, he extended the bag. "Here," he said simply, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "I think this is yours." Her eyes widened in surprise. She hesitated for a moment, studying him, trying to determine his intentions. Ethan did not flinch or look away. In that brief exchange, a silent understanding passed between them. He had acted out of instinct, not for reward or recognition. He had helped because it was the right thing to do. She took the bag with trembling hands, and a subtle nod of appreciation passed between them. The crowd around them murmured, some aliens whispering among themselves in languages Ethan could not recognize. The drones backed away, apparently satisfied that the bag was now in safe hands. The delegation member who had dropped the bag finally caught up, eyes flashing with a mixture of relief and curiosity, but they did not reprimand Ethan. Instead, they observed him, their expression unreadable, as though they were evaluating something far more significant than a simple act of assistance. Ethan stepped back, giving them space, and returned to his post, trying to ignore the whispers and curious stares that followed him. He had not expected anyone to notice or care about what he had done. For him, it had been a simple choice in a world full of chaos: help someone in need and move on. He had no idea that his small action had already set events into motion that would change his life forever. By the time his shift ended, the port had quieted slightly, the rush of incoming ships and departing freighters slowing as the day wore on. Ethan walked along the observation deck, looking out over the endless expanse of ships and docking bays. He thought about the alien woman and her brief nod of thanks. He wondered if he would ever see her again, or if his part in the story had ended in that single, quiet moment. He did not notice the small, almost imperceptible glow that flickered in the corner of one of the high-ranking officers' eyes as they observed him from a distance. The act had been recorded, catalogued, and analyzed. In her culture, acts of selfless help carried meaning far beyond what Ethan could imagine. Meanwhile, the alien woman returned to her duties, the bag safely in her possession. She moved through the port with the grace of someone who commanded respect, though she still glanced back at Ethan every now and then, noting the quiet determination in his posture, the honesty in his eyes. She had the power to shape futures, to influence destinies in ways few could comprehend. And in that brief encounter, she had seen something extraordinary. A human who acted without expectation, who had not hesitated even when surrounded by countless species who might have judged or feared him. Back in his small quarters, Ethan prepared a simple meal, his thoughts wandering over the events of the day. Nothing had seemed remarkable to him. He had merely helped someone retrieve a bag. Yet even as he ate, he could not shake a feeling that something had shifted, though he could not explain what it was. The port seemed the same, the hum of ships and chatter of aliens unchanged, but somehow he felt the faint stirrings of change in the air. He went asleep that night, exhausted from his long shift, unaware that the alien woman's influence had already reached beyond the port, touching officials, travelers, and observers in ways he could not see. His simple choice to help had placed him in a position that no human had ever been in before, though he did not know it yet. Across the galaxy, far beyond the reach of normal human knowledge, threads of fate were shifting, guided by an act of quiet courage, a single human decision, and a woman who could shape destiny itself. The next morning, the port felt slightly different. Aliens who had previously ignored him now gave subtle nods of respect. Security officers allowed him quicker access to areas he normally had to request entry to. Even small merchants greeted him warmly, as if he carried an unspoken authority. Ethan noticed none of this. He moved through his day as always, focused on his tasks, unaware that the galaxy had already begun to take notice of a human who chose to help when it mattered most. It was only later, when he was summoned by port authorities to a private chamber, that he would begin to understand the magnitude of his actions. But for now, in the quiet hum of the bustling port, Ethan Hale was simply a human who had acted kindly, without thought for consequence. And that choice, simple though it seemed, had set the stage for events that would reach far beyond his understanding, affecting the future of countless worlds. The morning after Ethan had returned the bag, the port hummed with the usual activity, yet a subtle difference lingered in the air. Humans like Ethan were still rare in the busy hub, often ignored or treated as background workers. But today, several subtle glances followed him wherever he went. It was faint, almost imperceptible, yet it made Ethan uneasy. He could feel the weight of unseen eyes, though he could not see who they belonged to. Ethan tried to shake off the feeling. He had done nothing remarkable. He had simply helped an alien woman retrieve her bag. Why should anyone care? Still, the whispers of curiosity and quiet respect lingered in corners of the port he passed. Merchants and workers he had interacted with for years now seemed to treat him with a newfound politeness. Security personnel allowed him to pass more quickly than usual, and even the drone operators who usually followed strict scanning routines seemed to give him extra space. It was subtle, but it did not escape Ethan's notice. He shrugged it off, attributing it to his imagination. The alien woman, whose name he still did not know, had disappeared into the crowds after he returned her bag. Yet, Ethan found himself thinking about her often. He remembered the precision in her movements, the way her eyes had held both fear and determination. There was something about her presence that lingered, a quiet intensity that set her apart from the ordinary travelers he had seen in the port. He could not have known that the bag he had returned was not just a simple container, but a device of incredible importance, tied to her authority and influence. Meanwhile, the alien woman had reached her destination, a discreet chamber deep within the upper levels of the port. Here she had access to observers, analysts, and records that no ordinary visitor could see. She held the bag carefully, examining its contents, and noted the sequence of events that had unfolded outside. Every action, every decision made by those around her had been recorded. And in the center of it all was Ethan, the human who had acted without hesitation, without fear, and without expectation of reward. In her culture, acts of selfless help were rare and meaningful. They revealed qualities that could not be measured by strength, intelligence, or influence alone. They showed character. And in that brief moment, she had witnessed a human who chose to act rightly simply because it was the correct thing to do. This observation was unusual, almost unprecedented. Humans were considered unpredictable, often reckless, and sometimes unreliable. Yet Ethan had acted with calm clarity and integrity. She leaned back slightly, her eyes narrowing in thought. She was part of a council that observed and guided events across many species, often determining the fates of entire worlds. The bag Ethan had returned contained a device that allowed her to trace decisions and record moments of critical choice. Every individual had the potential to affect the future, but few had done so with such instinctive precision. She recognized immediately that Ethan's choice could have consequences far beyond what he could imagine. Back in the lower levels of the port, Ethan continued his daily routine. He moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency, checking manifests, moving cargo, and ensuring that shipments were correctly organized. Yet everywhere he went, he noticed subtle changes. A security officer who usually ignored his presence greeted him with a polite nod. A merchant he had helped weeks ago now offered him a better selection of supplies, something that had never happened before. Ethan could not understand why these small gestures of acknowledgement were happening now, and it left him uneasy. Despite the changes, Ethan remained focused on his work. He had never been ambitious, and he preferred quiet labor to the drama of politics or social recognition. He took pride in his skills and reliability, knowing that in a chaotic port filled with hundreds of species and thousands of moving shipments, efficiency and trustworthiness mattered more than status or reputation. Still, he could not shake the sense that something had shifted, though he did not yet know what. In her chamber above the port, the alien woman began making inquiries. Observers and recorders accessed archives, pulling up historical data about humans, their habits, and their tendencies. Many species viewed humans as primitive or unpredictable. Their technological advancements were modest compared to some other civilizations, and their ability to survive in extreme conditions had earned them nicknames like Death World survivors in some circles. Yet, despite all their limitations, humans exhibited resilience, ingenuity, and morality in ways that could surpass expectations. She studied Ethan's profile, noting his history and habits. He was ordinary by most standards, simple, quiet, and largely unnoticed in the grander scheme of interstellar affairs. Yet his behavior that day demonstrated a quality rarely recorded in humans: conscious moral choice under pressure. He had acted without instruction, without reward, and without audience. In other words, he had acted purely on instinct and ethics. For the alien woman, this was significant. In her culture, power alone was insufficient to shape events. Influence required judgment, and judgment was guided by insight into character. She considered carefully what to do next. In many cases, individuals who demonstrated potential in small acts could be guided into positions of far-reaching importance. By choosing to help, Ethan had opened a door, though he had no idea that the door existed. Across the port, Ethan's day continued with subtle disturbances. Messages arrived at his workstation from departments he had never interacted with. Some requested his input, Others simply informed him of changes in protocol that seemed unnecessary yet were unusually courteous. He felt a growing unease. Something was happening beyond his comprehension. Yet he carried on, focusing on the tangible work in front of him. The crates, the manifests, the endless flow of goods through the port. By mid-afternoon, the alien woman left her chamber, walking among her own delegation to observe events firsthand. She watched Ethan from a distance, noting how he moved through the crowd with quiet confidence. He did not seek attention, did not make showy gestures, and yet his calm presence seemed to influence the environment around him. Aliens who had been dismissive now held small gestures of respect, subtle movements that most humans would never notice. She smiled slightly, a rare gesture for her because she understood what Ethan could not. In helping her, he had demonstrated a form of strength that few other species possessed. It was not measured by force, technology, or influence. It was measured by the capacity to act rightly when the outcome was uncertain and the stakes hidden. And in her line of work, such qualities were invaluable. Later, Ethan's routine brought him near the upper docking bays where the delegation had first arrived. He noticed a few individuals observing him from the shadows, their expressions unreadable. He assumed they were simply curious or perhaps security personnel checking the area. Still, a subtle tension grew within him. He had spent years in the port learning to navigate the complex dynamics of interspecies interactions, yet something about today felt different. He could not explain it, but he trusted his instincts to remain cautious. That evening, as he prepared to leave, a small messenger arrived with a sealed note. It was from the port authorities, requesting that he report to a private chamber the following morning. The note was formal, courteous, but carried a weight that Ethan had never experienced before. He did not know why he was being summoned, and he felt a mix of curiosity and anxiety. Normally, humans were not called into private meetings with high-ranking officials, yet the message was clear and undeniable. Ethan went home that night with the note in his pocket, thinking about the events of the past day. He still did not understand the significance of what had happened, but he could feel that his life was about to change. As he lay down to sleep, his thoughts wandered back to the alien woman, the small bag, and the moment when he had made a simple choice. He had acted without expectation, without thought for consequence, and yet it seemed that consequence was now approaching, quietly and inevitably. Across the galaxy, in places Ethan could never see, observers recorded and discussed the incident. The alien woman's colleagues reviewed her report, noting the human's behavior and debating its implications. They considered the potential for influence, the capacity for judgment, and the unseen ripple effects of a single act of kindness. In a universe where most actions were calculated and self-serving, Ethan's choice stood out like a beacon, a demonstration that even the smallest gesture could carry immense significance. By dawn the next day, the port was alive with anticipation. Aliens moved with efficiency, humans carried out tasks as usual, but an unseen tension hovered in the corridors and docking bays. Ethan arrived for his shift, unaware that he was the center of an event that would reach far beyond the port itself. When he was escorted to the private chamber later that morning, he would finally begin to understand the magnitude of what had happened. But until that moment, he remained oblivious, continuing to act with the same quiet integrity that had caught the attention of one of the galaxy's most powerful and perceptive individuals. And so the day unfolded with quiet tension, each moment a step toward a revelation that would change Ethan's life, and in ways he could not yet comprehend, the fate of humanity itself. A simple act of helping someone retrieve a bag, a choice made without expectation, had set forces in motion that even the most careful planners could not have predicted. The next morning, Ethan woke before dawn, feeling a mixture of curiosity and unease. The summons from the port authorities weighed heavily on his mind. He had handled strange requests before, but nothing like this. A private chamber meeting with high-ranking officials was unusual for a human clerk, even one as reliable as he. As he dressed and prepared to leave, he reminded himself to stay calm, to follow the instructions carefully, and to focus on the simple truth. He had done nothing wrong. When he arrived at the designated chamber, the hallways leading to it seemed longer and more silent than usual. Security drones hovered silently along the walls, their sensors scanning him carefully, but they offered no obstruction. Every step he took echoed faintly, the sound magnified by the vast emptiness of the corridors. Ethan felt a small thrill of anxiety mixed with excitement. Something significant was happening, though he had no idea what. As he reached the chamber door, two attendants bowed slightly and gestured for him to enter. Inside, the room was expansive, softly lit with a pale, almost ethereal glow. At the far end stood the alien woman, the one whose bag he had returned. She was no longer a mere traveler. She was surrounded by symbols of authority, her posture commanding respect. Observers from other species lined the edges of the room, silent and still, as though awaiting an event that would shape more than one life. Ethan's eyes widened. I don't understand, he said, his voice careful, uncertain. Why am I here? The alien woman regarded him for a long moment, her gaze steady and unreadable. You helped me, she said softly, without knowing what you were returning. Most would have waited for reward, recognition, or instruction. You did not. That is why you are here. Ethan frowned. I just picked up a bag. I didn't mean anything by it. I didn't even know who you were. She nodded slowly, as if confirming his words. Precisely. And that is why your choice matters. She moved closer, her presence calm but commanding. I am called Nyerlia. I am a fate weaver, an observer and guide of significant events. That bag you returned was not a simple container. It held a device that allows me to trace decisions, to see how choices ripple across time and influence outcomes. Your decision to help me has already begun to affect more than you can imagine. Ethan's mind raced. A fate weaver? What does that mean? Nyerlia's expression softened slightly. It means that I have the ability to observe and, when necessary, influence the unfolding of events. Most beings operate within the patterns of their species, bound by habits, laws, and limitations. But some moments, rare moments, can alter paths for entire civilizations. Your action has been one of those moments. Ethan felt a strange mixture of pride and fear. He had never imagined that a simple act of helping someone could carry such weight. Yet as he looked around the chamber, seeing the silent observers, the quiet authority in Nyerlia's posture, he began to realize that this was no ordinary situation. You're saying, he began slowly, that my returning your bag changed something? Nyerlia inclined her head. It revealed something extraordinary about humans. You acted without hesitation, without expectation, and without concern for personal gain. That is a quality that many species overlook in humans. You have shown clarity of judgment and moral instinct. That is why I must speak with you directly. The fate of your species, your people, may hinge on moments like this. Ethan shook his head in disbelief. I'm just me, I'm not important, I'm just a human worker. Why would my choice matter to anyone else? That is precisely why it matters, Nyerlia replied. You are ordinary by all measures, yet your actions reflect a truth that cannot be taught, measured, or engineered. Humans have potential that even they do not fully understand. A simple choice made without expectation can ripple outward and shape events far beyond what you perceive. Your act of kindness is now being observed, catalogued, and considered by many. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He had always thought of humans as small players in the galaxy, often ignored or underestimated. To think that his simple action could draw the attention of a powerful figure like Nyerlia was both humbling and terrifying. Nyerlia walked closer, her eyes locking onto his. I must ask you to consider the responsibility of your actions. Humans are at a crossroads. Many species doubt your capacity for judgment, fearing unpredictability and recklessness. But actions like yours demonstrate that humanity possesses qualities that cannot be dismissed. Courage, integrity, and selfless decision-making, these are the traits that define potential, and you have shown them today. Ethan swallowed, trying to absorb her words. I don't know what to say. I didn't think about any of that. I just helped. Exactly, Nyerlia said softly. And that is why you are extraordinary. You acted without calculation, without the desire for reward. That is what sets you apart, and it is why I have chosen to speak with you directly. The observers around the room remained silent, their attention fixed on Ethan. They represented multiple species, each with a different perspective on humans. Some looked skeptical, some curious, and others seemed quietly impressed. Ethan suddenly realized that his simple act had drawn the attention of beings far beyond his understanding, beings capable of influencing entire worlds. Nyerlia stepped aside and gestured toward the windows of the chamber. Outside, the port sprawled endlessly, ships arriving and departing, the hum of activity constant. "Look at the world around you," she said. "Most beings see only their immediate surroundings, their immediate concerns, but every action, every choice has consequences. Yours has been observed, and it has created a ripple that will shape the perception of your species. Many will now reconsider what they think of humans, simply because you acted rightly when it mattered most." Ethan struggled to comprehend it. He was just one man, and yet his behavior had become a test, a signal, a mark of potential. It was overwhelming. I don't know if I can live up to that," he said quietly. "You need not try," Nyerlia replied. "You have already demonstrated the quality that matters." The galaxy often judges by appearances, by power, by technology, but true strength lies in decision, in integrity, in choice. You have chosen correctly without knowing the stakes. That is why your action matters more than you realize. For the first time, Ethan felt a glimmer of understanding. He had always believed that small actions, simple acts of decency, could not make a difference in a vast galaxy filled with politics, technology, and power. Yet here he was, a single human, standing in the presence of beings who recognized his worth, not for what he had, not for what he could do, but for what he had chosen to do when it mattered. Nyerlia's voice softened further. "There is a decision to be made, though you may not realize it yet. Humans are under observation, and many species doubt your capacity for judgment. The choices you make, and those made by others of your kind, will determine whether humanity is considered a partner, a minor player, or a species unworthy of influence. You have shown that humans are capable of more than many believe, but more will be required in the future. The question is not whether you can act rightly, it is whether you and your species will continue to act rightly when the stakes are unknown and the consequences hidden." Ethan felt the weight of her words. He had only returned a bag. He had not sought power, respect, or influence, yet now the simple action had become a measure of something far greater than himself. I'll try," he said finally. "I don't know what else to do, but I'll try to do what's right." Nyerlia nodded, her expression one of approval and quiet satisfaction. "That is all that is required. For now, your path is simple. Continue as you have, act with integrity, and let your choices speak for themselves. The galaxy will watch, and your actions will matter more than you know." The chamber fell silent for a moment, the observers exchanging subtle gestures and quiet whispers among themselves. Ethan could feel the weight of their attention, yet it was not oppressive. It was respectful, almost reverent. He realized that the galaxy was larger and stranger than he had ever imagined, filled with beings whose power and influence far exceeded anything humans could typically comprehend. And yet, in the midst of it, one human's simple choice had resonated in a way that mattered. When he finally left the chamber, Ethan felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. He returned to his work at the port, carrying the knowledge of what had happened, though he still did not fully understand its significance. He moved among the ships and cargo, watching aliens conduct their daily routines, and for the first time, he felt a quiet sense of pride in being human. He understood now that the small things, the choices made without expectation, the acts of decency, the courage to act when no one else would, could ripple outward in ways beyond comprehension. That simple act of helping an alien woman retrieve a bag had become a turning point, not just for him, but potentially for all humanity. As the sun set over the sprawling port, casting long shadows across the metal and glass structures, Ethan paused to look at the sky beyond the docking bays. Ships from countless worlds glided through the atmosphere, their lights reflecting in the water below. Somewhere above him, Nyerlia observed quietly, noting his movements, recording his choices, and preparing for what would come next. The galaxy had taken notice, and humanity's potential was no longer invisible. And so, a simple human choice, made without expectation or awareness, had begun to shape the course of events in ways Ethan could not yet imagine. The path ahead would be challenging, filled with tests, decisions, and moments of truth. Yet, for the first time, Ethan understood that even the smallest actions could matter in a galaxy vast enough to hold countless worlds, species, and destinies. The ripple had begun, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. The next day, Ethan woke to a sense of unease he could not explain. Ever since the meeting with Nyerlia, the alien woman who had revealed her true identity, the world seemed different. The port felt quieter, as if it were holding its breath, Merchants, workers, and officials moved with purpose, but their eyes occasionally flicked toward him, as though measuring something in his expression, his posture, his very presence. Ethan tried to ignore it. He had done his work for years, and he knew that the galaxy often moved in ways humans could not immediately understand. Yet today, he felt the weight of unseen forces pressing gently on him, as if the decisions he made in simple daily tasks could ripple into consequences far beyond the port. He arrived at work early, as usual, methodically organizing cargo and checking manifests. Yet he could not focus entirely. His thoughts kept returning to Nyerlia and the words she had spoken. Humans were under observation. His actions had already begun to influence perceptions of his species. Other beings doubted humans, seeing them as reckless or minor players. And yet, in a single moment of instinctive kindness, he had revealed qualities that few expected. The realization left him both proud and anxious. He was only one man, but somehow, he was now part of something far larger than he could understand. Mid-morning, a small contingent of the port's officials approached him. They did not escort him as before, but their presence was commanding, and the weight of authority hung in the air. One of them spoke, her voice calm but firm. "Ethan Hale, you are requested to accompany us to a private observation chamber. Your presence is required immediately." Ethan hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "Again?" he asked quietly. I'm just a worker. What is all this about?" The officials said nothing, simply gesturing for him to follow. Ethan complied, his curiosity mingling with growing apprehension. He moved through the long corridors of the port, noticing subtle changes he had never seen before. Some doors opened automatically in his presence, drones cleared a path for him, and even merchants paused to watch him walk by. Something was different, something significant. When he arrived at the chamber, he found Nyerlia already waiting. Her posture was calm, but her eyes carried intensity, a reminder of her authority and power. Around her, several observers from multiple species stood silently, their attention fixed on him. The air was charged with quiet tension. Ethan felt a mix of awe and fear. He had not imagined that a simple act of helping someone retrieve a bag could lead to such a moment. "Ethan," Nyerlia began, her voice steady and commanding, "you have demonstrated qualities that few beings possess, but today you will be tested. Your species will be observed not just by me, but by many others who now consider the potential of humans. What you do in the coming moments will shape how the galaxy perceives your people." Ethan swallowed hard. I don't know if I can do anything meaningful. I'm just a human. I don't have power or influence." "That is exactly why this is important," Nyerlia replied. "Power alone does not determine value. Judgment, choice, and integrity are what truly matter. Humanity has often been underestimated, but these traits, exhibited in critical moments, reveal strength that cannot be measured by force or technology. You will now have the chance to act in a situation that will be observed, and your choices will demonstrate what humans are capable of." Ethan's heart pounded. He had been an ordinary worker for his entire life, and now he stood at the center of an interstellar test, a measure of human character. He was terrified, yet he felt a quiet resolve. He had acted rightly before, without hesitation or expectation, and he knew that he must do the same now. Nyerlia gestured to a large screen at the front of the chamber. Images flickered into view, showing a scene from another section of the port. A group of smaller alien species was struggling to contain a malfunctioning cargo transport. Containers had become unbalanced, threatening to topple onto nearby workers. The situation was dangerous. Any mistake could result in serious injury or loss. Observers watched the screen intently, analyzing every movement, every decision. Ethan understood immediately. The situation required action, and hesitation could be costly. Without thinking, he moved closer to the screen, focusing on the problem. He quickly assessed the risk, calculating how to stabilize the containers while ensuring the safety of nearby workers. His hands moved instinctively, giving precise instructions to the operators through his communicator. "Shift the support beam slightly to the left," he instructed calmly. "Counterbalance the upper container by moving the lower cargo forward. Everyone keep a safe distance, but remain ready to assist if needed." The observers whispered among themselves. Humans were often underestimated, and yet here was one who acted with precision, clarity, and calmness in a crisis. Ethan's actions demonstrated not just intelligence, but composure, courage, and integrity under pressure, the very traits Nyerlia had spoken about. Through the communicator, the cargo operators followed his guidance. Slowly, carefully, the situation stabilized. The containers stopped tilting and the workers stepped back safely. The malfunctioning transport was secured and the potential disaster was averted. Ethan exhaled, his hands trembling slightly from the intensity of the moment. He had acted instinctively, without fear, and the results spoke for themselves. Nyerlia observed him silently, her expression calm but approving. "You see, Ethan," she said quietly, "true strength is revealed not in the tools you possess, but in the choices you make when faced with uncertainty. You have demonstrated that humanity is capable of much more than many believe. Your species is capable of judgment, courage, and integrity even under pressure. This is what the galaxy will now see." Ethan shook his head, still processing the situation. I just did what I thought was right. I didn't know anyone was watching or that it would matter." "That is precisely why it matters," Nyerlia replied. "The act of helping, the act of choosing rightly without expectation or observation, is what defines character. Many beings act under scrutiny or for reward. You acted without either, and that is why your actions carry weight far beyond this moment." The observers around the chamber nodded in quiet acknowledgement. Representatives from multiple species were witnessing the unfolding of an event that could alter the perception of an entire race. Humans, often dismissed as minor players, had demonstrated qualities that few anticipated. Through Ethan, the galaxy was beginning to see humanity in a new light. Ethan felt a mix of pride and humility. He had always considered himself ordinary, but now he realized that ordinary humans could perform extraordinary acts. The galaxy had underestimated them for too long, assuming that strength and value were measured solely by power, technology, or influence. Yet his actions, simple though they were, revealed qualities that could not be ignored. Nyerlia stepped forward. "Ethan, your role here is only the beginning. Humans will face more situations, more tests, and more decisions. What you have demonstrated today is potential, but potential must be nurtured and exercised. The galaxy will now watch, and the choices made by humans will carry significance far greater than before." Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He understood that his actions had become symbolic, representing not just himself, but the potential of his entire species. It was a heavy responsibility, yet it was also inspiring. He realized that humanity's strength lay not just in technology or force, but in integrity, courage, and moral choice, the very traits he had exhibited without thought. Over the next several hours, Ethan participated in simulations and scenarios designed to test judgment, composure, and decision-making. Each scenario was more complex than the last, yet he approached each one calmly, relying on instinct, experience, and common sense. Observers recorded his every move, analyzing not just the results, but the thought processes, the reasoning, and the ethical considerations behind each choice. By evening, it became clear to all present that Ethan had passed every test, not because of exceptional skills or equipment, but because of the simple qualities he had always possessed: honesty, courage, and integrity. His actions demonstrated that humans could rise to challenges, make sound decisions under pressure, and act with selfless intent. Nyerlia addressed the assembly. "What you have seen today is extraordinary. One human has shown that his species is capable of judgment, courage, and integrity. This is a rare observation, and it will alter how humanity is perceived throughout the galaxy. The decisions made by humans from this point forward will be watched closely, for they will now be understood as capable of influence far beyond what many believed possible." Ethan felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. He had not sought recognition, nor had he imagined that his simple choice to help an alien woman retrieve a bag would lead to such a moment. Yet he had acted rightly, instinctively, and the results had exceeded anything he could have imagined. The galaxy had begun to notice humanity, not for its power or technology, but for its capacity to act rightly when it mattered most. As he left the chamber that evening, Ethan walked through the port with a renewed sense of purpose. Aliens and humans alike seemed to treat him with subtle respect. He was still the same man he had always been, yet he now carried the knowledge that one simple act of kindness and integrity could resonate across worlds and species. The sun set over the docking bays, casting long shadows across the metal structures. Ships glided silently through the skies, their lights reflecting on the water below. Somewhere above, Nyerlia observed quietly, her eyes noting Ethan's movements, recording his choices, and preparing for the next steps in a process that could shape the future of humanity. Ethan walked home that night, reflecting on the day's events. He understood that the tests were not over, that the galaxy would continue to observe humanity. Yet he also understood something profound. The value of his species lay not in power or status, but in the quiet choices made every day, in courage, integrity, and the willingness to act rightly when it mattered most. And as he drifted into sleep, the galaxy itself seemed to pause, acknowledging a simple truth that had been overlooked for too long. Humans, though often underestimated, could influence events in ways far beyond their own comprehension. Through one human's actions, hope, respect, and recognition had begun to flow in a current that would carry forward into the future. The morning air at the port was unusually calm. Ethan Hale walked through the corridors with a sense of purpose, yet there was an unusual quiet around him. He had spent the last several days participating in tests and simulations orchestrated by Nyerlia, the alien woman whose simple bag he had returned days ago. Each scenario had tested judgment, courage, and integrity. Now he sensed that the culmination of all those moments had finally arrived. Today, the galaxy would see the outcome of his actions, not just him, but all of humanity through him. As he approached the observation chamber, a small group of officials awaited him. Their posture was formal, yet there was a subtle shift in the air. Respect, curiosity, even a hint of anticipation. Ethan understood that something unprecedented was about to happen. He felt a quiet tension building within him, a mixture of nervousness and resolve. He had acted rightly before, guided by instinct and integrity. Now he would do so under the scrutiny of countless eyes from multiple species, watching to see what humanity was truly capable of. Inside the chamber, Nyerlia stood at the center, her presence commanding attention. Around her, representatives from dozens of civilizations observed silently, their gazes fixed on Ethan. He felt the weight of their attention, yet he reminded himself to remain calm. Integrity did not rely on fear or expectation. It relied on doing what was right, regardless of the audience. And that was exactly what he intended to do. Nyerlia stepped forward. "Ethan Hale, you have demonstrated remarkable qualities in recent days. Your actions have shown courage, clarity, and moral judgment. Today, your species will be evaluated not by power or technology, but by the capacity to act rightly when the stakes are unknown and the consequences hidden. The scenario you are about to face will test not only your abilities but the principles of humanity itself." Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment. He was ready. The screen in front of him flickered to life, displaying a scene from a busy section of the port. A group of alien workers was trapped inside a cargo bay as a structural collapse threatened to bring containers crashing down. Panic had already begun to spread among the bystanders. Some were frozen in fear, others shouted instructions that contradicted one another. The situation was chaotic, dangerous, and urgent. Ethan did not hesitate. His mind assessed the situation quickly, noting the positions of containers, the locations of trapped workers, and the structural weaknesses of the bay. He spoke calmly through the communication system, giving precise instructions. "Move the support beams here and here," he said, pointing to the positions on the display. "Shift the lower containers forward to counterbalance. Everyone else keep a safe distance. Trust the sequence and remain coordinated." As he guided the workers, he noticed that some were hesitant. Alien species often relied on rigid procedures, and the unexpected instructions confused them. Ethan's voice remained steady. "Follow the steps exactly as I say. You will all be safe if we act together. Trust in the sequence and act without fear." The observers in the chamber whispered among themselves. Humans were often underestimated. They were considered fragile, reactive, and unpredictable. Yet here was one demonstrating calmness, intelligence, and leadership under pressure. His decisions were precise, ethical, and focused on saving lives rather than personal gain. Slowly, the workers began to follow his instructions. Containers shifted, support beams moved into place, and the structural stress began to stabilize. A collective sigh of relief passed through the cargo bay as the immediate danger subsided. Ethan did not relax, however. He continued to monitor the situation, ensuring that no further collapse could occur. Every decision he made was deliberate, careful, and ethical, focused entirely on protecting lives. Nyerlia observed in silence, her expression calm but approving. "Ethan," she said quietly, "this is what it means to act with integrity. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act rightly despite it. Judgment is not about who is strongest, but about who chooses wisely. Humanity's potential is measured not by weapons or ships, but by the capacity to act rightly under pressure. You have proven that today." Ethan finally exhaled, the tension of the past minutes releasing from his body. He had acted instinctively, guided by principle rather than expectation. And yet the outcome was more than he had imagined. Lives had been saved, chaos had been averted, and his actions had demonstrated something extraordinary to every observer in the chamber. The representatives began to speak among themselves, their voices low but filled with respect. Aliens from species that had long underestimated humans now nodded quietly, recognizing qualities that could no longer be ignored. Ethan felt a mixture of relief and humility. He had done what he knew was right, and in doing so, he had elevated humanity in the eyes of the galaxy. Nyerlia turned to him with a rare smile. "Ethan Hale, your actions have shown the galaxy that humans are capable of integrity, courage, and judgment. Your species will now be regarded with respect, not for power alone, but for the principles that guide them. You have acted rightly, and in doing so, you have shaped the perception of humanity for the better. This is the essence of what we observe. That character can influence destiny, and that even a single individual can make a profound difference." Ethan felt a warmth in his chest, a quiet pride mingled with humility. He had never sought recognition. He had never imagined that helping an alien woman retrieve a bag could lead to this moment. Yet he understood now that actions, however small, could ripple outward and carry consequences beyond imagination. Integrity, courage, and choice had proved more powerful than he had ever realized. Over the next several hours, he participated in further evaluations, each designed to observe human judgment under complex and ambiguous circumstances. Every scenario tested principles rather than skill: who would act selflessly, who would consider others first, and who would act ethically under pressure. Ethan approached each task with the same calm determination. He did not hesitate, did not calculate personal gain, and did not seek recognition. Each choice was guided by principle, ethics, and the simple desire to do what was right. Observers recorded every detail, analyzing not just the outcomes but the reasoning behind each decision. Nyerlia's notes emphasized the significance of a single human demonstrating consistent integrity in a way that affected multiple species simultaneously. For centuries, humans had been underestimated, judged as minor players with limited influence. Today, they had proven otherwise. As evening fell, the evaluations concluded. Nyerlia addressed the chamber one final time. "The demonstration is complete. Observers from all represented species have witnessed a human act with integrity, courage, and judgment in multiple complex situations. The ripple of these actions has already begun to alter perceptions of humanity. The galaxy will now see humans not merely as minor players, but as beings capable of influence, moral insight, and ethical choice." Ethan listened quietly, absorbing her words. It was more than he had imagined. He had only acted rightly, instinctively, without expectation. And yet the results were profound. His actions had changed perceptions, altered attitudes, and demonstrated the potential of his species in ways he could never have foreseen. When the chamber emptied, Ethan walked through the corridors of the port with a sense of quiet satisfaction. Aliens and humans alike greeted him with subtle respect. The port had not changed in its physical structure, but the perception of humanity had shifted. He was still the same man he had always been, yet the world around him regarded him differently, not as a worker, not as a human of minor significance, but as someone who had acted rightly when it mattered most. Nyerlia watched from her chamber, her expression calm but proud. She had observed countless beings across the galaxy, yet few had demonstrated the combination of courage, judgment, and moral integrity that Ethan had. The results would resonate far beyond the port, influencing decisions, alliances, and attitudes toward humanity for years to come. Ethan returned home that night, exhausted but fulfilled. He sat quietly, reflecting on the past days and the unexpected journey that had begun with a simple act. returning a bag. That single moment had set in motion events that tested character, revealed potential, and reshaped perceptions. He had not sought recognition, reward, or status. He had acted rightly, instinctively, and ethically. That had been enough. As he looked out over the city below, lit with the soft glow of evening lights, Ethan understood a profound truth. Greatness was not always measured by power or wealth, but by integrity, courage, and choice. The galaxy had begun to recognize humanity not for its technology or weapons, but for its capacity to act rightly, and he had been the catalyst. Somewhere above, Nyerlia observed quietly, noting the final outcomes, recording the significance of each choice, and preparing to guide future events. Humanity had been tested, and it had passed, not through strength, cunning, or strategy, but through the moral courage of a single individual who had chosen to help when it mattered most. And so, the ripple of one simple act, helping an alien woman retrieve her bag, had spread far beyond what Ethan could have imagined. The galaxy now knew that humans could influence events, act with integrity, and demonstrate courage under pressure. The future of humanity had been altered, not by force or power, but by the quiet, ethical choices of one ordinary man. Ethan lay down to sleep that night, feeling a sense of peace and purpose. He had done what he believed was right, and in doing so, he had reshaped the galaxy's understanding of his species. The world was vast, full of unknown challenges and tests, but he now understood that every choice mattered. One act could echo across the stars, one decision could shift perceptions, and one individual could reveal the potential of an entire species. The galaxy would never see humanity the same way again, and it had begun quietly with him.